Hey. You're back. I'm back. We're back. For episode 3 of the tentative title, tentative format podcast T3F. I'm Noam, Neontaster, whatever. I exist in a weird limbo, a weird naming limbo. Because for the longest time, it was just easy to just, use the username that I used and whatever. And now I'm using my real name, but nobody's comfortable with it. People are used to calling me by my username, including people in my personal life, because nobody's ever comfortable with my name because it's not a natural American name. And so people just called me Neon or whatever. And I guess because they're kind of similar sounding, it was easier for people. Like, I feel like if my name were like Cadmium Taster, no one would, it wouldn't flow as naturally to people because it wouldn't sound as close to my actual name, I guess. That being said, like I said, welcome to episode 3 of T3F, the Forever in Development podcast. Took a week off because there wasn't really anything to talk about. I mean, I'm actually going to talk about that in a second. But that's also something that I'm going to have to learn to handle because, that's the way content production works. Sometimes you don't have an easy hour to talk about stuff, and you gotta either pull an evergreen or work around it. I don't know. I know people who have been writing weekly columns for years, and they don't always have what to write about. They figure it out. And so what I actually mean is not so much that there wasn't anything going on, because like I said, there is never not anything going on in this crazy ass apocalypse year. But sometimes it all just boils down to a list of things that are terrible. And I don't know if that's why anybody would tune into any podcast, let alone this one. And so, I got to find a different angle. And so I was going to say, the lack of stuff to talk about, in air quotes, was more about this sort of mounting sense of apathy about things, but not. And it's not an uncaring apathy. The idea is not who gives a shit about coronavirus and protests and crazy things Trump says in the election in China. It's more this almost despair, because even when both sides of an ongoing argument are both in turn just going too far all the time, it kind of saps your desire to even participate. I mean, it takes something like the coronavirus, right? It almost doesn't matter what you think about it. If you don't have one of the very extreme opinions about it, then it's almost hard for you to participate in the debate. You get drowned out by both of these sides, one of which are saying masks are a placebo and this is all bullshit, and the other side that says, those people are murdering us all, and people who are dying, or the blood is on Trump's hands. And it's you're somewhere where you're no, this is a serious problem, but also some of the stuff that they're saying about masks is overbearing. I don't think they should send the police, but I do think that they should. You know what I mean? There's so many subtly different aspects, and every sub issue of this also has its own layers of complexity, but everybody's just yelling about, fascism, and it's not fair that these people can do this and those people can do that. And that is something that should be discussed. The either double standards or the lack of consistency between what kind of things are allowed to proceed and which aren't, and under what circumstances, and just because that actually actively hinders any kind of coherent policy and getting people on board with doing the same thing. If people feel like the people who are telling them to do stuff don't think that those rules apply to them, they won't do that. And it doesn't even matter. I'll give an example. Like when Fauci was at the season opener, the Yankees were playing the Nationals, and Fauci was there throwing out the first pitch, and then he was hanging out in the stands without a mask, sitting next to, I think, his wife and his brother. And people got mad because he wasn't wearing a mask. And then people got mad at the people who got mad and said, well, no, because these are the people he's quarantining with, and so he's not even supposed to be wearing a mask next to those people. That's true. The problem, again, is when we're having all of these discussions about optics and about setting an example. Why isn't Trump wearing a mask when he's going here and there, even though maybe he doesn't need to? Because he should be doing it. There should be this like above and beyond. There should be getting the public used to seeing that, just to get it into their head that like, hey, just do this. You know what I mean? And so then when you have like an instance of Fauci not doing that, to get angry and say, well, technically he doesn't have to be doing that. He himself should understand that like he's alone in a big empty baseball stadium being filmed on national TV. Maybe, that should have been in his head, but and you know what? And he's not a public guy. He comes from like national health. He's not a spokesperson, but that maybe is a part of the problem as well, is that, he's lionized as the face of this, and maybe he's not equipped to deal with, the PR aspects of being the face of coronavirus. But that doesn't mean he gets a pass on doing things that I think ultimately like sabotage the things that he's trying to preach. Like the safety measures that he's trying to preach can be undermined by certain things that he says and certain things that he does, even if that's not the intent. Like even if he does it like totally unthinkingly, which also is part of the problem. And this is universal, and it's not just Fauci, and it's not just in the United States. In Israel, there were instances where both the prime minister and the president, had violated quarantine laws with their families that everyone else was upholding, and like their excuse was like the same excuse that everybody would give if they got caught. Oh, I miss my granddaughter, and she's helped take care of me since my wife died. And so, yeah, there's like fucking 300,000 other people in Israel who can be like, well, yeah, my wife died too, and my granddaughter helps me during the holiday. And they couldn't because they would have gotten a ticket. Meanwhile, your granddaughter was there at your taxpayer-funded mansion, even though you have staff. I don't have staff, and my grandson couldn't come. I had to cook for myself. You know what I mean? And so, okay, fine. This culture of like, the people in charge never feel like the rules apply to them. And that's always true. But in a situation like this where people's lives are legitimately being like majorly disrupted, not just in the economic sense, but, the like schools and the inability to see family and friends, there are legitimate, measurable impacts. People's lives are much harder right now, and even if there is some technical excuse for why somebody who's rich and famous and powerful can get away with doing that shit and you can't, even if there is some technicality, it doesn't matter. All of those things are obstacles to dealing with this in a proper manner. And that's where, like I said, that's where sort of apathy sets in. Maybe apathy is not the right word. Maybe it needs to be more like lethargy or, like early onset nihilism, because it is this idea of like everything's so awful. And then, yeah, like again, you got like the protests thrown on top of that now, like in Portland, and it just goes on, and there's this like informational war where there are vested interests on both sides. One side wants to say, this is nothing, and this is just propaganda, that things here are terrible. And then there's also plenty of people who have a fully vested interest in saying, this is what America's going to look like. If Joe Biden gets elected, prepare to see this in every city, all kinds of stuff like that. And once again, the reality is neither of those things. The reality is, there's some bad shit going down in Portland, and it's depressing that things are so political right now that it's like even like local and federal officials can't even like figure out whose side they're on. Forget like tactics and stuff. There's this whole idea of like whose side anybody is on that's also in dispute. But even that is somewhat theater, like the mayor of Chicago was going on TV and saying Trump's not going to bring his stormtroopers into my city. And then the next day it said, they had a phone call and they decided they were going to do it. So on top of all of it, a lot of this is just like posturing for the cameras. And for social media clout, and it's just out of control, because you have down to the level of like mayor and like local AGs and aldermen and stuff like that. Everybody has their own political career to worry about. It was just announced that St. Louis couple who had their guns out on their lawn, not on their lawn, on their like front porch or whatever, inside of like a gated community. The charges against them were dropped after bizarrely being filed in the first place. Because then it also came out that like the woman's gun was non-operable, and that this was known to law enforcement because it was rendered inoperable so that they could use it as a prop in a previous trial. So like they had to, in order to fire test it, like forensic fire tested after it was confiscated from them, they had to like reoperate it. Like they had to fix the gun in order that like they knew was broken, in order to then be able to fire it and see its ballistics patterns, or for whatever reason they do that. But yeah, when the charges were filed against them, everyone was like, what? For what? How? And then they were just, unceremoniously just dropped, because again, a lot of this is just theater. A lot of this is attorneys general is actually the plural, and other local officials who are feeling tremendous stress in their own communities and like tremendous pressure, like you gotta arrest these people and do it. And you know what? Like I'm still wondering whether or not this couple is gonna sue, because it doesn't matter. It like you can't just say like charges were dropped. Like you're not allowed to file, like if you file a frivolous charge against someone, that's not, you don't get out of that by just saying like, all right, I'm going to drop it. I mean, you do sometimes, but that doesn't mean that the person doesn't have like actionable recourse for you having fucked with them to begin with. I thought when I heard that they were going to get charged, I immediately said this is going to end with them suing the city. And I mean, we'll see. Like I said, now that this, they acknowledge that the charges were like bullshit, I don't know if they're going to like push this, or if they're going to decide, whatever, we'll move on. But like a symptom of all of this like yelling and the protests and the coronavirus and just leading to like tremendous amounts of stress. I've noticed like a wave along with the second wave of coronavirus. I'm detecting a second wave of coronavirus related stress and friction in general. Not just on Twitter, out in the real world. I remember in the deep days of the first quarantine, there was this oppressive sense where like people really were getting mad at each other, and friendships were being tested and strained and broken. And at some point it seemed like we were gonna weather the storm, and that things were gonna start to get better, and things were gonna kind of start reopening. And now there's this sense that there's this second wave coming, and I said on Twitter, in my own area, masking is now as extensive as it's been. It's more extensive than it was like in late March and into April for sure. Like everybody's wearing them all of the time. And so there's this sense that it's going to take longer. At some point, we had this sense that like, okay, maybe by the fall, things will get better and we could go see movies and do stuff. And now it's seeming like A, that's not going to happen. And B, who knows, not just whether, when this hump will like go, but also, because there's such a disorganized and spastic and politicized reaction to it, how long that might take. And then you got to throw in the fucking election and the things that now, all kinds of crazy shit that Trump is saying. And I got really mad at his whole, like, maybe we should postpone the election. That was my terrible attempt at a Trump impression. I do his hand mannerisms better than I actually do the Trump voice. But I got very mad at his trial ballooning of like, well, the mail-in thing is gonna be crazy, so maybe we should postpone the election. And then he said, "Oh, I was just trying to get your attention, people." But it's just like, okay, no, stop. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't fucking tweet shit like that. That's really that like. Again, I'm not going to turn this into a yelling about Trump. Like, I'm not going to. That's not the point of this podcast at all. Is to like say, and then Trump said this, and I believe me. I've said enough angry things about him on Twitter over the past few days. I don't need to reiterate them here. There's not much more to say. And believe me, if you want criticism of Trump, I'm sure it's easy to find. You're not going to be starved of content if the thing you're looking for is for somebody to tell you why something Trump tweeted is bad. But again, this all just feeds into stress, mounting stress. Everybody is stressed. Everybody's angry with short fuses. And I've found my stress levels and anxiety levels have like just skyrocketed. Last 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And so I've been trying all kinds of stress relief things. All kinds of, like I ordered a weighted blanket. I haven't gotten it yet, but I ordered it. And all kinds of other things like incense and like, I don't know, bath bombs. The point is like to use like pleasant stimuli in order to create like a general sense of well-being to like counteract the negative stimuli. I haven't gotten any of it yet. I just ordered it, but I guess I can like report back on how it worked. But one of the things that has worked a lot, weirdly enough, is playing video games for a couple of hours in the evening, away from social media and media in general, away from the moment, which is odd. Like, you want to live in the moment, but you want to live in your own moment. You don't want to live in the world's moment. So you turn off the world for a minute. And I've been playing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which I started almost a year ago and then stopped for a good 6 months. The early days of COVID were just not good for me, and I was gonna stream a lot and play a lot of games and increase my brand visibility on Twitch, and mentally I just could not get it done. But I'm back to playing it now. I want to play Ghost of Tsushima, which is a new game that everybody's kind of raving over. But I want to finish this game. But what I've found is I'm gonna do a long podcasty, maybe YouTube-y kind of review of Breath of the Wild when I finish it, which is it's gonna happen soonish. I'm slowly getting there. I'm like 100+ hours into the game. But specifically playing that game has been a big stress reliever because of the kind of game it is and because of how a lot of the gameplay goes. A lot of the gameplay just involves wandering around this like gorgeous, amazing world, exploring it and finding interesting things and doing fun things in it. And I think in a way it kind of counteracts that feeling of like isolation, COVID-related isolation and stress. And it's just, I mean, it's called Breath of the Wild, and you do have the sense of like, with these like big vistas and stuff and fun puzzles. But it doesn't have to be that. It just the idea of like taking time away and doing something at your own pace, because watching a movie, you know, is also like taking time away from something, and that could be a huge stress reliever too. But you don't watch a movie at your own pace. You watch a movie at the movie's pace, unless you're the kind of person who like pauses and plays and stuff like that. But I think part of the reason it's been very effective for me is specifically because it's a game that's very easy to take at your own pace and say, I'm not going to do this big boss fight now. I'm going to spend 3 hours looking for a hidden shrine, just like climbing up a mountain, looking around. Maybe I'll see something that I wasn't looking for and just go there and see what that is, because you're always finding new things in this game. Yeah, I don't know. It was just an interesting thing for me to note, because again, something or other happened this week where once again, video games came under scrutiny. I think it was Joe Rogan who said something about video games. And a lot of people I know who I consider to be very smart and very sort of insightful, otherwise insightful, have a really weirdly myopic and sort of patronizing view of video games themselves, the people who play them, and the reasons that they play them. Again, based on bad ambassadors. I think a lot of different communities that have like bad ambassadors. A good example, I think, is like the pot, the marijuana smoking community has really bad ambassadors, but it is way larger and way less stereotypical than people think. It just, like that image of like the burnout stoner with the big Bob Marley thing on their wall, and yes, people like that exist. Believe me, I went to music school. I met lots of people like that in college, but like that's not everyone. And I think people like that can be like bad ambassadors for the other ones, like vaping, just regular vaping. Like I think when there was the whole like scrutiny of like vaping, and there was the ban on the flavored vapes, the people they had in mind when they were like, oh sure, vaping, it's terrible or whatever, are these like college bros or whatever blowing out these like ridiculous vape clouds. Meanwhile, lots of people like quit smoking for real and like have gotten like legitimate benefits from vaping, and there's just like regular people. And so I think gaming has an ambassadorial problem a little, and it's not just the gamers, it's not just Gamergate and bleh. In general, I think. I mean, I don't know. Like, Ninja is a philanthropist and has sort of like a wholesome image, but I still don't know if he's a good. I mean, again, it depends as to who. I think gaming maybe needs better ambassadors to like the boomer community. I don't think Ninja is a good gaming ambassador to the boomer community, but like people in their 50s. Who are like hardcore gamers, or by hardcore, I mean like who do it all the time and play lots of games and know a lot about games and are just like, I don't know, lawyers and businessmen and people in just normative society, and totally break that mold that people like Joe Rogan envision, when they talk about gaming being bad. And yes, there are people, I said this and people got mad. I said, how about you just play video games, but not for unhealthy, amounts of time? And I don't know why people took that statement to mean something other than, Don't let it mess up your life. Because I said something like, oh, I've played 100 hours of Breath of the Wild. And someone said, oh, that sounds unhealthy. And I said, it took me 9 months to play that many hours. And even if it took less, if it's not like stepping on your work or your school or your relationship or your health, if it's not disruptive to other parts of your life, then it doesn't matter if you do it. I played last Saturday, I think 8 hours, like during the day on and off and like chunks. But that's because like I did all of my chores already. Like I'd cleaned and cooked and did laundry and shopping or whatever. I had like a full day to do nothing. And so I played a little bit, and then like I walked the dog. I was on Twitter a little bit. I was like, oh, I'll play some more. Played some more. That's not unhealthy. So yeah, I played 8 hours in the space of one day, but like, so what? It's a thing like any other thing. And yeah, when I was tweeting about this, a lot of people said, yeah, people say, oh, you play video games for 8 hours. Meanwhile, they'll like marathon The Office for 8 hours. Like, why is that somehow more intellectually stimulating or has some more inherent value as an expenditure of your time than playing a video game, which actually requires you to do stuff? You're not just sitting on the couch and letting, sensory input flood over you. Me playing Breath of the Wild involves a lot of thinking and a lot of focus and a lot of just this mission that I played the other day, like required like a lengthy period of a very hard thought and applying a lot of skills and lessons that you learn throughout the entire game up until that point. You're trained. That's brain elasticity. That's the same kind of thing that you would get if you sat and solved a bunch of logic puzzles that are medically shown to prolong like mental acuity. Like people who get older in age, they're told to do stuff like crossword puzzles and stuff because it helps you. It helps keep you sharp. Trying to solve some kind of Zelda puzzle is way more mentally stimulating than, watching an episode of The Office. No knock to The Office. I was just using that as an example. It could be any other show. People binge way dumber shit than The Office. Me included. Like I would binge, Top Chef or something like that, like a cooking reality show. Easy. I would watch an entire season of that in a day sometimes if I could. But yeah, the idea of taking some time away, but also to do something that basically gives you the option of doing things in your own pace, and maybe that's an interesting metric to consider when you're thinking about what you're gonna do to relieve your stress when you're away from social media. Try to find something that lets you dictate the pace in which you do it. Since social media is such a titanic current that you just get swept in it and have no control over it. Something suddenly gets tens of thousands of retweets and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I'll mention this briefly because I really don't want to get into it, but it's like someone was trying to get me fired. I won't call it a sincere attempt. That's not the point of it. The point was I said something. I think I called somebody silly, and they immediately started adding my employer and saying that I was a racist and and stuff like that. Nothing happened and whatever. Like I said, I don't want to get into it. But the point is something like that could easily just, snowball totally beyond your control. And all of a sudden it has tens of thousands of retweets and all of a sudden you are fired. You know what I mean? Or somebody else, not you, but a thing happens and let's say that for sure that the thing that people are tweeting is wrong. Like let's say you were there. And that, the people are tweeting something about an incident and you were like, I stood there and that didn't happen. You're still an ant trying to hold back like a tidal wave, right? It doesn't matter. The fact that you have actual knowledge doesn't make your staying force any stronger in that like giant like avalanche of emotion and clicks and people and clout. And so the ability to do something where you are the only like force that's in control, because, you know, in a video game, like, you know, even if things kind of spiral out of your control, you can always like, you can walk away from it. You can load a previous save. You maybe asserting some level of control like that is actually a good way to like recenter yourself. And I think I'm going to try to keep that in mind when I'm looking for things to do, activities to perform, to like get my mind off how toxic and awful social media is. And I guess the other thing I've been doing a lot of recently as a stress reliever, cooking, kind of has that applied to it too. I mean, I guess you could say that it is something that you set the pace for. And, you know, any kind of failing or problem is, you know, basically your own fault and nobody else's. But yeah, I've actually enjoyed it a lot. And it's something I kind of found myself forced to do initially because of COVID. And because I went on a strict diet where I would just have to prepare very specific portions of things. And I just needed to like improve my skills so that I wasn't just eating, you know, like a 3-ounce chunk of, you know, boiled chicken every day. I needed to make stuff taste good. And you know, a lot of money that I saved on not going out and stuff during quarantine, I invested in like cookware and stuff and sort of got to it. And it's become a real sort of fun hobby. I mean, I don't eat a lot of the really indulgent stuff that I cook. I give it to my neighbors and such because I don't want to ruin my my diet. But it is helping me sharpen my abilities to cook things that I can eat. And, you know, I'm not going to always be on a super controlled diet forever. And so it'll be nice to be able to make myself a pizza or a cake or some kind of, you know, meat dish that's just crazy good. And I you know, when the first couple of times when I did stuff that was sweet or, you know, or stuff that was more like indulgent, I remember thinking to myself, I wasted years like just ordering the same takeout and stuff when I could have just spent, you know, a couple hours making something ridiculous, which is not that hard, you know, if you followed the recipe properly and, you know, kind of not be afraid to try to cook the same thing 2 or 3 times, you know, like on subsequent weeks until you kind of get it right. I'm in the midst of doing that now. I redid some kind of peach galette / cobbler kind of thing that I messed up last time, and I messed it up again in a less substantial way, but I also know like what I'm going to do next time to get it perfect. That's the, you know, you're kind of practicing it, and it's fun, and in the process you are eating something good. Like, it's not that I put salt in instead of sugar and so it's inedible. It's like a delicious peach confection kind of thing. It's just not exactly what I was trying to make. But I don't know. I don't know if any of like cooking content should even be a part of this, or should I like say a thing I cooked and give you a recipe for it? That sounds like a really bizarre thing to do on this podcast. But like I said, it's perpetually in development. It's going to be the perpetually in development podcast. So why not have a cooking corner, as I call it on Twitter, Tasting with Taster. I should do like a Babish parody video, which I would already do if I actually had a way to do a decent video here. But that's coming. I gotta upgrade my hardware so that I can make better podcasts like this, and also better video content and gaming content as well. Because yeah, those Breath of the Wild play sessions that I was mentioning, some of them I stream on Twitch. I give all the plugs at the end, but more often than not, I'm playing off stream these days. I just found that like waiting until I felt like streaming was just like putting me off from playing in general. And so if I feel like playing, I'll play. And if I feel like playing and streaming, I will play and stream. And, the idea is to move towards some kind of schedule of streams. It's just hard. Like the world is kind of crazy right now. And, there's this like a lack of desire to set any kind of long-term plans or develop some kind of regular schedule, because who knows what's going to happen in like 5 weeks from now. Aliens could land, the way this year is going, or the Yellowstone caldera could erupt and this would all be pointless. But yeah, whatever. We'll do it as it comes. But when I start Tsushima, when I finish Breath of the Wild, and I start playing Ghost of Tsushima, I will absolutely stream, at least a couple of like early play sessions, because I do think it's really cool to see somebody's like initial reaction to a game, and I haven't really seen any footage from it, read anything about it, just a little bit, just enough to know that I want to play it. But I have no desire to like be exposed to a lot of it. But yeah, like if you watch on my YouTube channel, again, plugs at the end, some of my streams of like Horizon Zero Dawn or Nier Automata or Bloodborne, those are all games that I just turned on stream. Like I did not play them before I streamed them, and just being able to see my initial reaction to them, I think, is very interesting. I find that the most interesting part for me to rewatch my own streams is to see my initial reaction to certain things. In Nier Automata, there's like twists and crazy plot things that happen, and they just blow my mind. Like there's a couple of clips of me just like going absolutely ballistic. Or just like being totally in awe of how good a game looked. Like Horizon Zero Dawn camera mode, in some places I was just like floored by how good that game looked. And yeah, Breath of the Wild too. Like I will often just like it'll be hard for me to put into words like how impressed I am with that game. And like I said, when I finish it, I'm going to do a longer review, because I do have a lot of things to say about it in longer form that I constantly repeat when I'm streaming. Here's the things I like about it. Here's the things I don't like about it. But in general, I just have some slightly longer form thoughts about it in general and how it made me feel, which is like an intangible that's so important that it's hard to score, something like that. It's hard to quantify. For me to say something like it made me feel like a kid again is something that's hard to measure, right? And so I gotta explain a little more about like my history and how I felt playing video games as a kid and which video games I played as a kid and such. So we'll get to there. But a couple of other social media related things to close out this episode are the Twitter hack. A little update on the Twitter hack, where Twitter announced that they were hacked by a 17-year-old kid from Tampa. No big state actors or trial runs of cyber terrorism, or it was a spear phishing. It was some kid who spear phished Twitter employees and got credentials and got into their God mode console and did some stuff, scraped the DMs of certain people and downloaded the Twitter data of certain people and did a couple of things like that. And the kid got arrested. And, of course, some people are saying he's the patsy and yada, yada, whatever. That's always going to happen. That doesn't even matter. But I think, let's assume for a second that it's just a kid who did it, right? I think that's probably right. But even if you don't, let's just assume for a second that it is. That to me is better news than a lot of the other options, especially the spear phishing part, because no matter how sophisticated and powerful your security system is, if ultimately somebody who has the right credentials has admin capabilities, then that's a weak point you're always going to have, unless it's a kind of a thing where it's location specific, meaning like you can't enter God mode Twitter console if you're not at the Twitter office. But especially in the post-COVID days, that's going to be going bye-bye anyway. So you're always going to have those human, because I think they used some weird euphemism, human engineering or something like that, to describe the way that they were hacked. The point they were making is, somebody scammed our employees, and that is always going to be a weak point. And so it's actually somewhat reassuring to know that something like this happened simply because somebody at Twitter put their password in a place where they thought was legitimate and was not, and was actually like a scam. Obviously, that's not good, right? And obviously, there needs to be ways to mitigate the ability of somebody to just go in and, start ripping up wires. And I don't know what they do or don't have. It seems like they just had a, like a username and password, and now you can tweet from any account, and you can do whatever you want to any account. And maybe it needs to be more involved than that. Like maybe there needs to be some additional step, like on a nuclear submarine, you're gonna have to have two people like click the edit button at the same time. 3, 2, 1, mark. But to me, it was a slightly reassuring notion that this wasn't some like heretofore unknown method of compromising social media. It was like a good old, here's the password box, and it's actually not the password box. And the last thing, because there isn't much more to say about that other than Twitter came out the other day and said this. The last thing is TikTok and Trump's announcement that he was going to ban TikTok, which of course he made at like 11 p.m. on a Friday night to the press pool on Air Force One, and didn't explain what he was going to do, how he was going to do it. He just said, hey, I'm going to ban TikTok, which is super on brand for Trump, and also like just a really bad way to sell anything, especially something that's nominally good. I mean, again, because somebody said to me, well, but like letting the government ban apps is a bad precedent. And I said, you're right, but I don't even know what he means when he says we're going to ban TikTok. That's part of the problem with Trump, is like, what do you mean ban? Like, tell me what you're going to do. Banning TikTok is a result. An end result of you doing something is that TikTok was going to be banned. But what does that mean? Like, what are you actually doing? Tell me that, and then I'll decide if it's something that I think sets a dangerous precedent or not. But of course, again, because it's Trump and because of how Trump did it, the immediate instinctive pushback against it coalesced into a narrative about how he was doing this as payback for the Tulsa rally thing, where people on TikTok got together to like RSVP seats for Trump's Tulsa rally, which made it seem like the attendance was going to be big, and then it wasn't. And then they all got together and laughed about how they trolled Trump, the TikTok teens or whatever. And so, now Trump is mad and he's going to get back at them. Now, one of the reasons this argument doesn't sound right, even if it is within Trump's character to do something like that. Like the Biden campaign banned TikTok. Biden campaign employees cannot have TikTok on their phones. It's banned in India. Japan's looking to ban it. There are like multiple individual intelligence assessments about it being like a security risk. Apple came out, because when a new iOS update came out, where Apple was like, we have a new feature on our iOS. It'll let you know if an app is trying to scrub your data somehow. And like, it turns out TikTok is like grabbing your clipboard every 15 seconds. Like, your notifications are going off. Like, TikTok just stole your clipboard. TikTok just stole your clipboard. TikTok just stole your clipboard. And then TikTok were like, we're gonna stop doing that now because we got caught. You have all of that. You have the very robust scholarly data and knowledge about the intimate relationship between Chinese tech and the Chinese Communist Party, their help in like surveillance and their, oppression of the Chinese people. And still, because it's Trump, you're just going to have the weirdest fucking defenses of it. And it's so frustrating. It brings me back around again to apathy, right? To the idea of like somebody said to me, like I said, is it a good precedent that the feds are banning apps? And I have this like overwhelming desire to say like, who gives a shit? Because no matter how good a reason there is, people are still defending it because Orange Man bad. And so fuck it. It becomes so difficult to try to have a nuanced conversation where like it doesn't matter how good your argument is. People are going to send me Taylor Lorenz's tweets about how banning TikTok is bad because she loves it and writes about it and I don't know what. Or Joy Reid saying something like, doesn't Trump realize that those teens are just going to find another TikTok? I was like, good. Let them find one that isn't a spyware app for the Chinese government and use that to troll Trump. Fine. I'm totally cool with that. I think that's also why I think that the narrative that Trump is like trying to get revenge on TikTok because the people on TikTok did it to him is ridiculous because there'll be another TikTok in 5 minutes if TikTok goes away, and even if not, Trump doesn't get trolled on Twitter and he doesn't get trolled on Instagram and he doesn't get trolled on Reddit, they're acting like TikTok is like the bastion of digital anti-Trumpism when the digital sphere is the bastion of digital anti-Trumpism, no matter where you hang out. That's where anti-Trumpism thrives, is online. And so it's just this peak of not wanting to even give a shit and just wanting the good thing to happen, the quote unquote good thing to happen. In this case, you really want to undercut China's ability to pull shit, right? And so ban TikTok. Like I said, tell me what steps you're actually going to take in order to bring about the banning of TikTok. Because if what it is, issuing some kind of edict, some kind of executive order that shutters TikTok in the US, I don't know. I have no idea how you go about doing something like that. But if what you're doing is you're implementing some kind of rule set that would make TikTok non-viable unless it were to totally sever itself from any kind of Chinese government influence, then what you're doing is you're putting TikTok itself in an impossible position. That's better to say to TikTok, okay, you want to operate in the United States, fine. Here's a set of things that you cannot do. And if you do, then you get slapped with a fine or you can't operate here. And so then their inability to operate here is not us banning them as much as their unwillingness to stop the practices that make it such a dangerous app to own. I've said that the best way to consume TikTok content online is to let some other sucker download it off TikTok and put it on Twitter because you don't want that shit on your phone, for real. And it's not even about what do I have to hide from the China? I'm small and Google has all my info too and whatever. It's this whataboutism is really dangerous. I mean, there is a lot of bad shit that happens. The United States does bad shit to its citizens and Western tech companies do bad shit to their customers, but it is not something that you can compare to the techno establishment that goes on in China, especially considering what they're actually doing with it. I know it's difficult. When everything's a concentration camp, then when you say China's putting Muslims in concentration camps, then it loses its punch. A statement like that can lose its punch when everything that's bad is also called a concentration camp. And yes, putting my immigrants on the border in like caged facilities like that and stuff is bad. It's sometimes it is like it's a necessary thing to do, but it is done in ways that are bad and or evil. But you really can't compare it to what goes on over there. Like, you really cannot compare it to people being kidnapped out of their homes and being loaded on train cars and taken places. And like a story just came out about the NBA's like training academy in Xinjiang, where like they were like beating students there in front of, like NBA employees and stuff. I know, I understand, like moral relativism is a comfy blanket, because you don't need to criticize other people like that. You don't have to take hard stances because who are we? Like it's more easy for me to criticize my own people. Like I'm going to talk about how Trump, talk about China. Why am I going to talk about China when there's so much bad shit happening at home? And by the way, that's not just an anti-Trump position. A lot of people on the right will say, what do we got to be in the Middle East, or what do we got to be in Germany? We have our own hungry people here to feed, and we need that money for them. That rationale is used a lot in order to avoid having to like embroil yourself in business that you consider not your business, right? Mostly because it's debilitating and it's overwhelming to be embroiled with all of the problems of all of the world. I get it. And I'm not saying that you got to put on a uniform and go fight the Chinese. And I'm also not saying that you must never buy anything that's made in China or ever have positive relations or views of anything that's Chinese. That's ridiculous. It's an ancient country with an expansive culture and multiple ethnic groups and, literature and media and plenty of people who are great, awesome entrepreneurs who are not, do not harbor authoritarian views and are just totally, perfectly fine people. That has nothing to do with it. But you need to have moral clarity about things like their government, their government's relation with Chinese big tech and its effort to like surveil their public, export that type of surveillance culture to other countries, in Europe, in the Middle East, in South Asia, and you really can't lose sight of the difference in scale. And some people say, every time somebody criticizes Trump or whatever, you're asked to China to talk about China as a deflection. And yeah, people do that. People absolutely use that as some kind of like political cudgel, like, oh, you're talking about Black lives, but you don't give a shit about China. And sometimes that is totally a deflection tactic and it's totally inappropriate to bring up. But sometimes it isn't. And especially when you say stuff, when you talk about TikTok and people say, well, Google steals your info too. Yes, Google is bad. Google does bad stuff with your data. But Google is not part of a legitimate, authoritarian state actor that is actively using the data, because Google takes your data and it uses it for Google's purposes. It uses it for analytics, and it uses it to develop all kinds of advertising algorithms and content sorting and all kinds of crap like that. With China, with stuff like TikTok, I know that data feeds a malevolent actor. It goes into stuff like blackmail files and shit like that. I mean, it really isn't on the same scale. It might be on the same scale in terms of raw quantities of data and stuff like that, but the purposes, the goals, and the way the mechanism operates, where a tech company there is essentially just a front. It's like a faux civilian front for a government operation. Huawei and ZTE, companies like that, operate fully in tandem with the government. I don't know exactly how to describe it, what the exact right terminology is, but I mean, it is they are not separate entities in the way that we perceive. Even if you think oh, Google was in bed with the Obama administration, and maybe if Biden comes back into power, oh, Google's going to be in bed with the Biden administration. That's not the same kind of in bed. Like we're talking about different scales of operation here. And yeah, it is sad to see these knee-jerk defenses of TikTok just because of this Trump thing, and just because nobody wants to come across as even slightly maybe falling on the same side of some issue as Trump. And so there has to be some kind of weird reason, like the Tulsa rally, that he wants to ban TikTok. And we'll see. This was just announced the other day, so time will tell how this will develop. And like I said, I'm totally on board with somebody ripping off TikTok's idea, shamelessly ripping it off, and bringing everybody from TikTok onto their platform so that they continue mocking Trump and clogging up his rallies, because I literally do not care about any of that. I really only care about the fact that TikTok is yet another way that China is trying to extend its grip, its power and its grip, and doing it through, popular social media. That's just another tactic. I mean, Tencent, which is another big Chinese tech conglomerate, they're doing it through video games. And then, people get banned from Blizzard tournaments for saying free Hong Kong. It's all very slow and it's very subtle. It's very, put the frog in the lukewarm water and you slowly turn the fire up. You don't throw them in the boiling water. And something needs to happen. And in the case of TikTok, unlike places like Blizzard or stuff where it's more like soft power influence, the idea that they're actually just stealing everybody's data from their phones and doing fuck knows what with it is really just beyond the pale, and we can't just let it continue. And so we'll see what happens about that. And on that note, I'm going to bring episode 3 of Tentative Title, Tentative Format, T3F to a close. Thank you for listening in again. I'm Noam, or Neontaster, whatever you want to call me, and you can always find me at Twitter, at Neontaster on Twitter. My YouTube channel, which has my older podcasts that are about pop culture, video game streams, and more, is youtube.com/c/Neontaster. My Twitch channel, which I've been streaming Breath of the Wild on a couple of times, and like I said, Ghost of Tsushima streams coming soon, is twitch.tv/Neontaster. And these podcasts are downloadable in MP3 format and stuff on Libsyn. That is neontaster.libsyn.com, LIBSYN. It's short for Liberated Syndication, if you don't remember how to spell Libsyn. It's gonna pop up on iTunes and Spotify. I'm still that's something that's a little outside of what I normally do, so I just gotta figure it out, and I will do that. So that'll happen really soon. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll catch you all next time.